Okay, cool. So, wait. Oh, no, this one. Okay. So the first thing that we're gonna cover is the pamphlet stitch, which is pretty quick to go through. So I'm just gonna grab like 5 pieces of paper here. So just like 1, 2, 3. And this is 4, so that's fine. I'm just gonna like make sure they're kind of flush and then fold it in one direction. And like this would differ for some types of paper, but you'd find it easier to fold in one direction than the other. So for this, it was kind of easier for me to fold it in this direction. So I would just say that it's always best to fold it in the, like with the path with the least resistance, which would be like along the grain. And so once you have that, I'm just gonna use the bone folder and like flatten out the edge. Let's do that. And so like it helps just give it like a good crease. And so then I have this. And the next thing I'm gonna do is there's this craft paper, which should be like the thin brown piece of paper that we added to that. So this is gonna be our cover. So you can use that or the white Bristol sheets that we included, and it would be the same thing. Just like fold it in the, sometimes you kind of like have to test it out, in the path of like least resistance. And then just piece it. Great. And so now that we're done, so sometimes like depending on your paper, you'd have these like crease marks. So it depends. I would say just make sure like, especially if you're folding for your cover, that the paper doesn't tear when you fold it like that. I think the Bristol might, but the craft paper should be fine. And afterwards, you're just gonna put those together. And so we're kind of done with this. And I'm gonna open it up. So there are a lot of ways that you can make your marks for the stations, which are like the holes that the needle go through. One thing that I just like to do is just to measure it out. So since we folded a letter page sheet, so I know that its height is 8.5. So if I wanted to center it, I'm just gonna mark 3 holes. So I'm just gonna like have this here, and then probably, let's say 2 inches and 2 inches offset. Yeah. So then that's mostly it. And oh, I didn't mention, feel free to like interrupt anytime if you have any questions. So then next thing is I'm just gonna pick the owl, which is this. And we're just gonna make the station holes through it. I would say like if you want, sometimes the paper might shift, so it helps to like use the clips on the edges, but this is small enough and I'm pretty confident that it wouldn't move. So you just like push the owl through. I'll say sometimes it helps to rotate it and like twist it as you push through, just so it's not tearing the paper as much. And then the holes don't have to be really big, but just big enough for the thread and the needle to go through. And always like watch out for your fingers as you make the holes. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. So then back, I'm gonna fold it back in and just make sure that it's flush. Okay, so the next thing from here is thread in the needle.
Sorry, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, sure.
What do you mean by flush?
Oh, just like they're aligned.
Okay.
It's like if they move, then
Sure.
the holes become misaligned and you'd be creating double holes. So like so.
Right.
It helps if you like sometimes use the clips we included just to keep them in place. Yeah. So then the next thing is thread in the needle. So I already did this, but I'm just gonna cut it and do it all over again. So, and one question that I'm sure most of you would have is into like how much thread you would need. And a good reference is always like the length of the spine. So about this much, and we have 3 stations. So sometimes it helps to double it up, but I'm pretty sure like this, like if it's at least twice as long as the length of the book, that should be fine. And then in thread in the needle, so you just like go through. It always takes me a while to do this, I don't know why. But so once you go, I'm gonna use a different end. Okay, so once you go through it, to make sure like you have a little knot so it doesn't become undone as you stitch, would be to pass the needle through the thread once more. So with a little bit of excess here, I'm just gonna like push it through here. So I kind of have this loop. And if you look in your guidebooks, you kind of have that. And then just gonna pull it in. So then I have something like this.
Sorry, what size of the needle again?
I would say you can use any one, but it would have you'll try and make it a little relative to the size of the hole that you have. So if you have a really small hole, then I'll pick like the smallest needle, but I think mine's like the medium-sized one. Yeah, so anyone's fine. It's just that if you start stitching and you realize that it's either too big or too small for the hole, you like adjust them accordingly. So there's 2 ways to do this. So you can start from the outside or from the inside. And I'm gonna do the inside stitch. So you start from the middle station and you go through to the outside. And I would just always suggest that it's good to have a little excess here and just hold it down with your thumb. So you have something like this. Okay. So now that we have this, from here on, it's just like a choice of yours. You can choose to go through like either the bottom or top station. So I'm always gonna call like whole stations. And then, so I'm gonna go through the bottom one. So it's just gonna go in and then come back out of this. And then through the next one. I had a little shift. Through the next one. And out through that station. And then back through the center one. And I would say like when you're coming through the center, make sure it's like on the opposite side. So if I have this held down to the bottom, once I once I come back through it, it should be on the opposite side. So that when I'm tying my knot, I can do it around the middle like stitch. Yeah. And so that is it. And we can just use this little pair of scissors to just like cut it all off. And then you're done. So yeah, so this is like the quickest one to do. I would say sometimes if you really want to be precise with it, just because each sheet of paper has its own thickness, it's gonna, like the extra sheets are gonna like just stick out. So if that bothers you, you can always line this up and just use your X-Acto knife. Just like trim it down. Sometimes it takes a few cuts to do this, but like, I'm not that precise. Yeah. Clean that side up a little bit. Now it looks much cleaner and it's a little bit flush. And if you wanted this, the knot to be on the outside, it would be the same process. So instead of going in through here, you're just going through here. And with that, it would look more like this with the stitch on the outside. So it's just like a preference on which you think looks better. And then, yeah, so that's it. So any questions on this? Everyone got it? Awesome. I don't know if you want to, but if you could show me just like quickly the books, if you want to, like you don't have to.
I'm embarrassed. Mine's kind of uneven, but like.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Like, it's all
I
good.
don't want this I don't want this recorded for eternity. How that?
Yeah.
Hi, Victor, it's Hannah. I'm just have my camera and sound off for the most part because I'm having to multitask for work, but I'm gonna watch the recording later because it's going a little fast for me while multitasking, but this is
Okay.
great. Great job.
Okay, sure. Oh, also, like, let me know if I also have to slow down in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
We do not
Okay.
have the excuse of multitasking. We're just a little bit slow.
No,
We're
it's all
trying our
good.
best.
Yeah, so I can go over it. I have tons of paper. So let's do the outside stitch this time. So I'm gonna just pick 4 sheets. And then fold it, crease it. Very uneven. Crease this. And grab this for the cover. Crease that. And then put it in. I have this. So right now I'm honestly just gonna eyeball where I want the stations to be. So I think this is probably the center. And let's see here, and then here. Here. And it's a little uneven, but it's fine. Honestly, it kind of bothers me. So I'm gonna make a station here, just a little offset. And just like watch for my fingers. And that it's kind of on the spine fold. So make that. and do that again. Okay, so yeah. And where did I put my thread? So there it's the needle. So I'm just gonna thread the needle once more. Piece here. Also, let me know if I do anything off camera, because I kind of have to look at the Zoom recording while doing this. So sometimes I might do something off camera while it's not in view. And then, so I'm gonna thread the needle once more. So go in through the eye and leave a little excess. And then push the needle through the thread and just pull until it's kind of here. Okay. So this time I'm gonna start from the outside. So I go in from the outside to inside. Just sometimes pulling it out is a hustle. I'm gonna use this just to push it out. Okay. I think I need to make this hole a little bigger. So once I go in, like I leave a little excess. So on the outside. And then, so I'm gonna go in through the top hole and just pull the thread until it's kind of tight. And then on the outside, I'm gonna go in through the bottom. So once I came, like I went in here, I'm gonna go in through the bottom. I think I have to make all my holes bigger. And then it's always good to have one piece on one side here. Then now on the inside, I'm gonna go back through the same hole and just make sure that my starting thread and the ending one are on opposite sides of this middle stitch. I'm just gonna push that out. And so once I'm here, I'm just gonna pull this until it's kind of tight and then cut this off. And then just tie a knot over this. So like that. Like I kind of like to do a double knot sometimes, but wanted to create a little bow on it. It looks good. Yeah. Then that's it. Then the next thing I did is sometimes it's fine to keep this, but if you wanted it to really line up, then you just cut this excess off. But yeah, we have these two. Yeah, that looks good. Courtney. Hi, Karina, how's it going on your end? Amazing, great. And then Brenda, how's it?
We're still trying to figure out trying to tie the like bow here, but I think we got it.
Yeah, I probably should have gone slow on that. So let me undo this. Yeah. Okay, I mean, I can do it with this. So with like this, so I cross it and then loop underneath it and then pull it. So then cross and pick one end, loop it through, and then pull it. Yeah. How much time?
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so we have an hour and 30 minutes left, but I'll try not to make it longer than it needs to be. So we're gonna move next to the Coptic stitch, which I'm gonna move extra slow with it because it can be a little confusing if you don't get the rhythm right. So we're gonna go through the same thing. So I'm gonna grab about 4 pieces of paper and then create a signature with them. So signature is basically when you just fold the paper in on itself. So for this, I'm gonna make 4 of these. And just for a guide, I'm gonna label them. So this is gonna be 4, and I'll get to this. Like, you don't really have to write it on this, but this just helps me keep track of them. So this is number 4. And so gonna pick 4 sheets again. And then take this, then fold it. Okay. Then crease this. I'm gonna put this on here and call that 3. Pick 4 more sheets. Okay. Um, 2 here. Add this to it. So at this point, I have 4 signatures, and all I did was just fold 4 sheets of paper on themselves. For this stitch, you need at least 3 signatures, but I'm including 4 just so I'm using 4 just so we know how to add as many signatures as you'd like, because let me see. With this I had 4 signatures. I think I used 4 with most, if not all of them. Yeah. So it's possible for us to do it with 3. but just so like you can add as many as you want, depending on how much thread and time you have or how thick how many pages you'd want. So now that we have this, and I'm gonna call this 1. So what we're gonna do next is cut our cover sheets. So so generally I would suggest that you use a thicker piece of paper for the covers. So you should have 2 Bristol sheets. And so you can use those. And the only thing is, so this was a letter size sheet and we cut it in half. So that means for the cover it would have to be 5.5 inches by 8.5. So what I'm just gonna do is cut this to match that. So I'm gonna need, I think this should be, yeah, this is about 12 by 9. So I'm just gonna have to cut that down a little bit. So this will be 5.5 here, and I'm gonna mark that on both sides, just so it's flush. And then always make sure that you're cutting on either a cutting mat or the chipboard sheets that we sent, and not on your actual table or surface. So just gonna cut this down. And then, so this was 5.5 inches. So this is gonna be 8.5. Okay. So, okay. That's a good fit. So I'm just gonna cut one more sheet to match this. Oh, and this might probably be easier. If you didn't use up all your craft paper, it's already a letter size, so you just have to cut that right down the middle. But it's just that the Bristol is a little larger, so. And when let me know when you're done. As you can see now, I have 4 signatures, my cover and back sheet, and I'm just checking that they all match. So yeah. That here. So, I'm just gonna go ahead a little bit and just say like, once you have one of the pieces of the covers, you can mark like any length between like 1.5 inches, probably an inch should be fine. I'm gonna do 1.5 inches, just like on one side. That's 1.5 inches from the edge of one of the covers. And I'm just gonna rule a line along it. So this will come in handy later, but I'm just gonna do that now. So when everyone's ready, you can just like give me a thumbs up in the chat, and then we can go on from there. And, oh yeah, so while we're still waiting, one thing I'm gonna do is just gonna thread my needle. I would say like be generous for this stitch and use as much as you need. Like I'm just gonna cut a whole like a really long piece, and it's fine if you feel like it's not enough, because there's a way to, like, if you do run out of thread, we can always continue. So you don't need an extraordinary long piece, just long enough to like get started. And so, so for this stitch, sometimes it helps, at least for this kind of stitch, to double thread your needle. But I would say you don't really, for this, we don't really have to, because one, our paper is really thin and we don't have a lot. But for this, I had to double thread my needle, because one, the paper is thick and the cover is also thick. And so that just helps like reinforce it better. But for this, it's fine if we just thread it once. Yeah. So I'm just, at this point, we are just gonna wait, and then we can start whenever everyone's ready. Okay, great. So then now we're gonna start. So yeah. It's really important that, so I labeled these 1 through 4 because it helps to keep the order in which we would create the holes. So since I've numbered them this way, what I'm going to do is I'm always going to make sure that I have them stacked in this order. So now I'm going to just use like some of the clips to hold them in place. Here. Another one here. And we're gonna put another one through the center here. But before that, with your ruler, I would say, wait. So you'd measure 1 inch from each side. So from the bottom, I'm just gonna mark 1 inch here. And then we need at least 3 holes or 3 stations on either end. So then I'm gonna mark 2 more, make 2 more marks, at least 1 inch apart. So this was like 1 inch, 1 inch, and 1 inch. And I'll do the same, so I can just like put on this 3-inch mark and just follow through with that. So this is about accurate. So it might not be as clear here, but I just have, so this is 1 inch, 1 inch, and 1 inch. And then 1 inch, 1 inch, and 1 inch. And so now that I know like I have this little bit of a recess here, I'm gonna put this clip here, just hold it down. So the clips are honestly not mandatory to use. It just helps like keep things aligned so you can have more accurate marks. So then what I'm gonna do now is with a straight edge, I'm just gonna transfer that mark onto the other signatures. So I'm just placing it here and just like marking it down. And then here. And like mine would probably not be as straight because I'm kind of just freehanding it here. But if you really want to keep it aligned, I'll just put it against your table and then mark downwards. Yeah. So at the end of it, I should have all my marks just like transferred onto the signatures. And like, this is honestly just easy. Like the quickest way, I could have taken each sheet and just like marked out the 1 inch marks, but it's just like a quick way to do that. And so once I'm done with this, I can take the clips off my table. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna stack the covers on top of each other. So I just have them stacked on top of each other. And this is where that line we drew comes in handy. So all you're gonna do is, actually, sorry. just so we're more accurate, I'm just gonna take one piece of the cover, just put the signatures on top of it. I guess I just need one of them. And with the owl, I'm just gonna create marks on the cover based on the lines that we transferred. So you could just like, so you could do this, or you could just create 1-inch marks. But the reason to do this is that there's always going to be some degree of error, especially when you're transferring the marks. So to have your stitches straight, it helps to make the marks in reference to what you already have, just so they're more.
Can you repeat how far in the?
Oh yeah, so
should be?
this is, so for this line, anything I'll say from at least 1/2 inch to 1 inch should be okay. I use like 1/2 inch, but yeah, anything from like 1/2 inch to 1 inch should be okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Repeat that. And then once I have all of these made, I'm just gonna make the holes a little bit bigger with the owl. And I guess since we already made the pamphlet stitch, you kind of have a sense of how large you need your holes to be. I'm just gonna go through and make these larger. I think that's large enough. And then I'm just gonna pick the second half of the cover, put it underneath. And so now I have the other piece of the cover underneath this, and I'm just gonna use that as a reference to make my holes. Yeah, so now I have these, and then I can just make them bigger on my own. At the end of this, you should have both of your covers with 6 holes in them, and each of them at least 1 inch apart and half an inch to 1 inch in. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna put these aside, and then I'm gonna come back to our signatures. Same, so I have my 1 on top and like in that descending order. So I'm gonna pick 1, 2, 3 off, and then open up the 4th one. So I just have the 4th signature opened up. And now all we're just gonna do is, with the marks that we have, just create signature holes through them. So what I did is I picked the bottom one, flipped it around and opened it up. And then I just, one thing that I would say is that try and keep them on the crease line as you make the holes, because if you don't, then the paper would just, it wouldn't align as nicely as you'd want it to. So then I'm just like making sure that at least the tip of the owl is right on the crease line. Yeah. So I have these 4. Yeah, so again, just repeating that for all of the signatures. Mhm. Yeah, always, always make sure that as you make the holes, your paper is like aligned to each other. If it keeps shifting, you can use the clips to hold them in place. Then, yeah, making sure they're aligned. And sometimes you have to make the holes, yeah, just like make the holes as large as they need to be. Okay. Like, just to be mindful of your fingers, a thimble comes in the pack. So just so like you don't hurt yourself as you go through it. Okay, so now I'm done. I've made all the I made all the station holes through each of my signatures. I'm gonna wait till we're all on the same page, and from then so I'm gonna wait till we're all on the same page, and then we can start the stitch. So is everyone on this page? Honestly, as long as but you're done making the holes through the bottom signature, we can start.
I have one more signature to do.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds good. Then if you haven't threaded your needle, you can go ahead and do that. And I'll just say like I have like a really long piece, like this is how much I used. But again, with this stitch, if you do ever and run out of thread, there's a way to like continue with just a new strand. And so while we're getting ready, I'll just say you tie a knot at the end of your thread. So try a little knot. Like 1 knot is fine. Sometimes I do 2 if I feel like it's a little smaller than the hole, but I think this is fine. Okay. So from here on, I'm gonna go extra slow because it can get a little confusing, but trust me, once you get the rhythm, it's just the same thing over and over again. Okay. So do I have a thumbs up to continue? Yay, awesome. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start from the bottom here and just take the needle through the bottom signature. Have mine shift a little. I'm probably gonna make my holes a little bigger. Okay. Oh, sorry, wrong direction. So this way. So from the inside. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna make all my holes a little bigger because otherwise they're too small. Right. So we're gonna start by coming in to the page. And then, so I'll just say for safety reasons and because we have a long piece of thread, that once you take your needle through, just put it down and then pull on the thread itself, just so like you're not yanking the needle across your face or like your body. So then when you get here, you can just test your knot. So now I see like it's not going through and I'm okay with that. And I'm gonna just fold this and keep it to the side. So then what we're gonna do is on the cover, you're gonna come in through the bottom of the cover. So if I going through here, I'm just gonna make sure like that's the bottom. And put the needle down and just pull the thread through. And so then while you do that, we just have to make sure like this creates a loop along the spine. And in pulling your thread, try not to pull it too hard so that it doesn't rip the paper. But then what we want is that once you pull it all the way through, then it's flush here. So it's like right on the edge. So this is what I have here, if that's clear. And so now, and so this is it's like a common thing with like the Coptic stitch. Most of what we're doing is looping around stitches that we've already made. So now with the needle, I'm gonna go in and then loop around this. So like this. So I'm going in and around it. So again, in and around this. And then I pull it out. So put the needle down and then pull on the thread. And so you want to pull it until it's kind of tight here. So at this point, I'm going to pause because that's like one of the difficult stages because I'm going to undo what I did. So maybe it's easier looking at it this way. So what I basically did was, if I were to turn the paper this way, all I did was come in through here and then out through this other side. So then if I have this down on the page, I came in through here and then out through this other side. And then, what happened? Okay. So once you have that, the next thing is that you have to take the needle and go back through the same hole. So at this stage, we're gonna go back in through the same hole. So like if I lift it, you see like I'm coming back through the same hole here. And then I'm gonna pull this. And then pull it out. Yeah. And then it's okay if it's a little loose. Doesn't have to be super tight. As long as the edges align, it should be fine. And at this stage, we're just going to move to the next station here, in, and then out. Just pull the thread through. And it's going to be the same thing that we did. So it's in through the bottom and out in between. Pull this out until it's aligned to this edge. And then in and around that. So I don't know if this is clear yet. So in and around that stitch you just created. Then pull the thread out. And then we go back in through the same hole. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to repeat that up until we get here, until we get to the last but one station. But I'm just going to be repeating the same words over and over again. Trust me, I think by the time you get to the third or fourth hole, you should probably get it, but feel free to interrupt me if you need me to go over it. So once you come in through it, in, so with the cover, you loop around the spine from the bottom. Again, you're going around it to the bottom. And then with the stitch that you've just created, you go in and around it. So again, in and around it. So I'm gonna, and then we go back in through the same hole. Run the thread out. Okay, so I'm gonna pause here. Is everyone okay with that? Or yeah. Somehow, okay. Yeah, it does take a while because it's like I try and think of it just in like repeating that loop kind of. So it's like when you create a stitch, you loop around it and then you create your next one. So I create my first stitch. So it's just, as if I had to name it myself, I'll just call it loops, I guess. But so once I'm here and I'm out, I create my first loop by going in from the bottom and coming out in between here. And then we pull that all the way through. And so now we've created this stitch. And so what we want to do is loop around the stitch. So we go in and around it. So I guess this might also help. So if I have this flat like this, what I'm doing is going in through here and then out through the other side. So I guess if you notice, for most of my stitches, I start from the left side. So I stitch from the right to left. Back into this. And then repeat this in, come out. And so you go in from the bottom, in between the signature and the cover. We move out. Pull it out. And so, I mean, this time I made it a point to have my thread come out to my right side. But whether it's your right or your left side, all you're doing is looping in and around that stitch that you created. So if this thread was on this left side, I would be going this way, but now it's on this right side. I'm going in and around this. And then right back into this. And so, yeah. So when you get to the, I'm gonna pause, I'm not gonna continue, but when you get to the final hole, once you go in and you come out, and I loop from the bottom here. And since I'm on the left side, once I come out, I'm just gonna stop here on this bottom one. So is everyone okay with this? Have you gotten used to the movement? I guess, yeah. Okay. So yeah, so let me know when we're all on the last signature. So here I just went in, came out, looped through the bottom. So I'm just gonna pause here because it's at this stage that we're gonna add the next signature to it. And then we'd go on. And you'd realize that as we go on, it's gonna be that same motion, like going in and out, looping and back in through the same hole. I'm gonna pause here. Mhm. I guess since I've like kind of reached the end, do you want me to go over the stitch again or we're all good? Okay, I mean, oh, great. So no rush. I think we have the time. So the only modification that I would do right now is I would say maybe instead of 4 signatures, we'll just do 3 this time. So you can like take out one of the middle signatures. Yes. Yeah, we'll just do 3. And then I would explain, I'm gonna do 4, but no, I'll just do 3, but explain how we would go about making the 4th one. Yeah. So would it be safe for me to move on to adding the next signature? Awesome. So once you're like here, you want to repeat that same motion by looping in and out here of the previous stitch that you've made. The only difference now is that instead of going back in through the same hole, we're gonna go through the first hole of the next signature. So instead of going in, out, and back through the same hole, I'm just gonna go back in through the first hole of the next signature. And then pull on that until it's aligned. So for all of these, we came out loop through the bottom in and around that stitch and back in. But on the end, instead of going back in, we go through the first hole of the next signature. Great. And so once you're here, it's going to be the same motion with just like one difference. So now I'm gonna go in through the next station hole. Thread through. And make sure it's kind of tight, but that I'm not ripping the paper. So now at this point, what we're gonna do is we're gonna loop in. So it's probably easier to see if I open up the pages like this. So now, once you're here, it's that same motion. So we're gonna loop in here and out of the previous stitch on that previous signature. So I'm sure you're starting to see that it's the same thing. So once you come out of it, you're gonna loop in and out of that previous signature. And so now if I put this flat, you can see that it's around this knot here. And then we go back in through the same hole. Just like, whoop, here. And to know that, yeah. And so we're just gonna repeat that over and over again. So in, and once you come out, so like, honestly, when I first learned the stitch, it was easier when I laid it flat and went through like this. So you go in here and then out. So you can do it either way. So I'm going in and out through the right side, but you can also do it through the left side. So if you go in one direction, you just come out through the other. They are just like looping around that previous stitch. And then back in through the same hole. Yeah. And then again. So yeah, let's just keep going. So in and out. Close this. And what I'm gonna do is on the stitch in between the previous signature and the cover, I'm just gonna go in and out of it. So in, around, and out. And just do that. Then back through the same hole. Yeah, once again, sorry if I'm just like saying the same thing over and over again, but yeah, just like go in and out. Then you loop around the stitch in between the cover and the first signature. and then back in through the same hole. So once you get to the last station hole, so this is a decision for you to make. I am gonna make, well, how much time do we have? Okay, so I'm not gonna use 4 signatures here just because of the time constraints. But if we were to add a 4th signature, it would be similar to how we added one here. So once you thread in and out and around the previous stitch, and do that. So if I were to add a 4th signature, it would be the same premise that instead of going back through the same hole, I would go through the first hole of this next signature. So because I'm gonna do that quickly. So then we have that. And it's the same premise. So if I go in and out of this, I would just recommend that you stop at the 2nd signature and probably not add a 3rd because of time. Just because adding the cover itself is another, that also takes getting used to. But this is just for the recording. So if you have like as many signatures as you'd add, it's the same premise that once you come out, you're looping through the previous signature. So this time I'm not gonna loop between the first signature and the cover, but rather between the 2nd and the 1st signature. So in and out here. So if I were to open this up, lay it flat, you'd see that I'm going through this gap here and not the first one. So if for some crazy reason you were adding like 100 signatures, for the 100th, you would go through the gap in between the 98th and the 99th. Yeah. So it's like always going through the gap of the previous signature. So I'm gonna quickly do this. And then so what I'm doing here will be similar to where you're at. So it's basically in, yeah, in and out. So check it. And now because I'm on the 3rd signature, I'm looping in between the 2nd and the 1st. But if you were on the 2nd signature, you'd be looping around the 1st signature and the cover. So then, yeah, that's the main difference. And once I do that, I'm gonna go in and out of this. So yeah, so feel free to add the 3rd one if you like. But once you're done with the 2nd, we can just pause on there and then would add the cover. And the last one, but oh yes, wait. There's one important thing that I should mention. So let's say, so now I have like a lot of thread. So if everyone could like pause and just look at. So I have a lot of thread and I'm fairly confident that I can finish everything with this. But say if you were working and you only had like this much thread left, you can always, so I don't really need to do this, but it's a good time to demonstrate. So if you're ever running out of thread or you feel like it's not enough, you can like create a knot here. So what I'm gonna go in through here and in through this loop. So you can just create a knot here. And that should be fine. Sometimes I leave a little excess here and I'll show you why. And I just click that. So what I did was I created a knot here. And I'm just gonna change my thread just because. Let's go back to, yeah. I'm gonna change to this thread just so you can see the difference. Okay. I'm gonna rethread this. So, and I think, yeah, this much should be fine. Yeah, so if you ever like, or even now, if you see like you probably have about 4 inches of thread left and still a ways to go, you can tie a knot here. And all you just do is when you thread your needle again, you tie a knot at the end. I like to leave a little extra here, just so then if I want to kind of keep this continuity here, then I can tie this to that. But once you have that, all you're doing is pushing the needle back through the hole. Until it's here. And if you want to like clean this up, you can like tie a knot here. It's gonna do that. Yeah. And then you just continue like business as usual. So from here, I know I have to go in and around the previous one. And then you just keep sewing. So I've seen videos where people use that to have different colors of thread along it. So like you can just do that. So instead of creating this inner stitch, once you loop around and back in, you just tie a knot on itself, pick a thread with a different color, go in and out. So not to say like these don't matter as much, but it's fine if you don't have them in between, because yeah, I've seen, I saw someone like who used like different colors for that, and basically that's what they did. Okay, so I'm gonna pause here because whenever you're sewing your last signature before the cover, you kind of do them at the same time to some degree. So once you're on the final hole here, I would just say that we'll pause. And then when we are all on the same page, I continue from there. Okay, so are we all good to start adding the cover and the final signature? So with this, okay. So I'm gonna go even way slower here because this is the this is the mistake I said I made in the guidebook that I sent. But so you're gonna want to pick your cover and your signature and have them stacked as they should be. So here, instead of going in, around, and back into that same signature, what we are gonna do is we go in from the top of the cover. And so I would say, like, you don't want to make it, and when you're pulling it, always make sure you have the signature in between it, just so you don't pull it in too tight. And so once I have that, what I'm gonna do is, and this is like the step that I skipped, we're gonna go in and out of this. So we're gonna loop around that stitch that we just created. So again, with this stitch is just about making a stitch and then looping around the same stitch that you just made. And so after so you go in and out of the cover, loop around that stitch. And then after you're done looping around it, you move it into the first hole of the last signature. So to go, to go over it again, let me undo that. So I had this. Clean my desk a little. So I had this. So I went through the top of the signature and out. And with that stitch that we've just created, you go in and out of it. So like this thread came out through the right side, so I go in and out through the left. But if this was on the left side, I'd go in and out through the right. So once I loop around this and kind of have this here, and then we go back into the same hole, the first hole of the last signature. And then we pull that out. So, yeah. So mine is a little loose here, but if you wanted to tighten that up, it's just like going back, like picking, it's like going back and picking the individual threads, but I'm okay with it. Just like make sure it's kind of tight as you do it. And then from here on, I'm gonna go through the next signature hole. And this is a little more like what we're used to until this stage. So now that it's out here, you go in and outside the previous stitch. So in and around that. So if you just have two signatures, what you'd be doing is going in around the gap between the first and the second signature. And so once you do that, in and around that. So you pull it down to make sure it's a little tight. And then from here, you go through the cover. So through the top of the cover, so in and out of that. So we pull this so it's real tight. And so now that we have this, so here my thread is on my right side. I would go in from the left around this stitch that I've just created here. So again, so now I'm going around that stitch that I just created. And then back into the hole. Yeah. And then it's, again, to repeat, it's like you go in and out, then around, in and out and around, in and out, and then around. So to repeat that, so I come in, so in and back out. I have that. And so this is my previous stitch. So I go in and around that. And then instead of going through the same hole, we go through the cover. So in. And by extension, if you think about it, what we are doing here is similar to, like, if I flip this upside down, it's kind of similar to what we did at the very beginning. So like, remember at the very beginning, all we had was this, and then we went in and around that, and then back into the same hole. So it's like you're redoing what we did at the very beginning, but in reverse. That makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of like that. And so we just repeat this until the very end. Mhm. In. And around the previous stitch. Through the top of the cover. Then back down here. And then in and around the stitch that you just created. And then back in through the same hole, the next hole of the signature. Let that open. And then in and around that. Through the cover. Then in and around the stitch we just made. And then back through the next hole. Same hole. All the way through. And so once you get through to the end, it's in and out, in and around the previous stitch. Through the top of the cover and out. So it's like basically the same thing. And then you go in and around the stitch you just made. Let's make sure that's flush. And then back through the same hole, this side. So at this stage, all you're gonna do is create a knot around here. So I'm gonna go in here and with this little loop, I'm just gonna go through this loop and then pull that until it's tight. And then we just snip it off. Then you're all done. It was unintentional, but I kind of like the color difference. Anywho, so I would say sometimes when you're done, like the book will be a little uneven. That's because usually would have a book press to like keep the spine pressed down until it's flat. But since we don't have that, what you can do is with the chipboard sheets that we sent, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut them down to size. So our sheets where while I'm doing this, if you need me to go over anything with the cover, let me know. I have another test piece that I was doing here that I can use as a reference. So I'm just gonna cut this down to size.
Hi, I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I thought I had enough string to finish it, but I got to the last signature. I just have like one more loop to do,
Okay,
but I am out of string.
so
How should I do this?
okay, so let's see. So basically you're like, okay, I'm gonna, do I have enough? Yes. So, let me continue. Okay, I'm trying to like imagine where you are. So could you come back to like this stage? Wait, hold on. Give me a second to like try and catch up to where you are. And we'll go on from there. I'm gonna go in and out of this. I'm happy that I had this piece lying around. So, wait. And then, okay. Top, bottom, and back through it. Okay. So, could you so I'm guessing like you're here with just this hole to go. So what you can do is create a knot around this stitch you have here. So you're gonna go, I mean, from either direction, you can go in and out of it to just create a knot right there. So after you have the knot, you can just like cut it. And once you thread your new needle, once you put like your new reel of thread on it, you tie a knot at the end of it, and you just continue through the next hole like normal. So as though like nothing happened, kind of.
Oh,
And-
I see.
And then you just continue.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so you don't really have to clean this up, but sometimes I just like to, that I'll just like tie a knot around this, but as long as, I can do that well enough, as long as this knot wouldn't go through the hole, you're fine. So sometimes I do a double knot just to be sure, but I think it depends on how large your hole is. And then from here, you just like continue as usual, still like nothing happened. You had enough thread from the beginning. And then you loop in and around that, back through it. And so I guess the main difference for you here would be that now you can't make a knot over the next thing because there's nothing. So you just make a knot on the thread itself and just pull it down to match. Yeah. And then snip it off. So yeah, so like this is my test piece and you can see that I haven't done this, but this is just, maybe I'll do a video on that later this semester, but this is like how if I wanted a different color of thread here, so I can just do that independently. So I'm gonna tie a knot here and just run it through. In and out. And back. And, And and then tie a knot here. And so, yeah, so although I skipped this, I easily recreated that. And I can just clean all of this up. Snip it all. And I still, like, the paper for this was really soft, so it looks kind of janky, but yeah. Okay, where was I? Okay, back to making your own like book press, kind of. And this. And although I'm using these pieces for our makeshift book press, one thing I like about the Coptic stitch is that you can be very flexible with what you use for the cover. So just to put these back, so like for this, I used wood. And I consider it flexible because it doesn't fold on itself. So you can basically like use any material that you want. So if you probably wanted more of a hard stock cover, you could use this. And if you have vinyl or like leather, you can put that around it. But for this purpose, I'm gonna use this as a makeshift press. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just gonna. Okay. So all I did, so after I cut these, it helps if you cut them exactly to the size of the book. So I'm just gonna put these two pieces on top of the book. And with the clips that we have, I'm just gonna put them on the edges. So the reason I use the cardstock before using the clips is that sometimes the clips might leave stains on your cover and you don't really want that. So I can just do this, which is just gonna like hold it down. And you can leave it for a few hours. Or like if you really want to be sure, let me put this right on the edge. It's right on the edge here. And so all I'm just doing is squishing this down with the clips. If you leave it like this for a while, so sometimes just to be sure I leave it in for like half a day or more, depending on how many sheets I have. And so after a while, if you take it out, the book will be more or less flat. So this is another, I've made a lot of these, probably a bit too many, but this was another one that I did, and I used the same method. And so now if you look at it, it's pretty flat and the pieces don't stick out. But yeah, that's how you make the coccyx stitch. So I'm gonna stop the recording right now.